It's not every day that a single court decision sends shockwaves through every corner of the country, cutting through political noise, legal uncertainty, and years of heated debate with one defining moment. But today, we're breaking down a scenario that gun owners, lawmakers, constitutional scholars, and millions of everyday Americans have been waiting to fully understand. A ruling that, if it were ever handed down exactly like this, would instantly reshape the meaning of the Second Amendment across all 50 states. So whether you're a longtime 2A supporter, a cautious observer trying to understand what this would mean for public safety, or someone who just wants clarity in a world full of noise, this is the breakdown you absolutely cannot skip. Because what we're analyzing today isn't a minor legal update. It's a nationwide shift in how carry laws could function if a ruling of this magnitude were ever finalized. Before we go deeper, let me be completely clear. What you're about to hear is a detailed, commentary-based look at a hypothetical Supreme Court outcome, a scenario built around the idea of a massive Second Amendment victory where a nationwide carry ban is eliminated. It's based on legal trends, real constitutional arguments, and major cases shaping today's landscape, but it is not a description of an actual, real-world ruling. Instead, it's an in-depth exploration of what would happen if such a ruling were handed down. And trust me, the implications are enormous. They touch your rights, your responsibilities, your daily life, your safety decisions, and the entire future of how American gun law could unfold. Now with that clear, let's get straight into the hook, because this is where things get intense. Imagine waking up and finding out that decades of debates, lawsuits, court battles, and political fights over concealed carry requirements, permit systems, restrictions, and bureaucratic obstacles have suddenly shifted overnight. Not in one state, not in 10 states, not in regions, but across the entire country, all 50 states, all jurisdictions, all previous restrictions collapsing under the weight of a single Supreme Court opinion built on constitutional text, history, and intent. No more patchwork of different rules depending on where you live. No more states operating under restrictive, may-issue frameworks capable of denying ordinary, law-abiding citizens the right to carry based on vague criteria. No more permit delays stretching for months. No more bureaucratic red tape blocking people who pass background checks and meet legal requirements. Instead, the foundation of carry rights would be standardized by the highest court in the land. But that's only the surface. The real story begins with what such a ruling means beyond headlines. The ripple effects that touch self-defense laws, enforcement practices, transportation rules, public carry policies, sensitive location definitions, and even the legal exposure gun owners face in courtrooms nationwide. This kind of ruling wouldn't just eliminate a carry ban. It would redefine how the Second Amendment is interpreted going forward, including how courts evaluate any future restrictions, how states write new laws, and how far the government can go in controlling the ownership and carry of firearms. And this is where things get incredibly important for gun owners. Because whenever a major shift in constitutional interpretation happens, especially one tied to something as historically and culturally significant as the Second Amendment, the biggest risk isn't what you understand, but what you don't. Missing even one detail could put you in legal danger, not because the law intends it, but because rapid changes create confusion, misunderstanding, and uncertainty. And that's why this video dives into every angle of the situation, breaking down the impact in a way that makes sense to every viewer, no matter their legal background. So let's walk through how such a ruling could logically unfold. A case challenging a broad carry restriction would have made its way through lower courts, creating conflict between circuits or directly challenging long-standing state-level permit requirements. The Supreme Court would accept the case not just to address one small part of carry law, but because the issue has national implications and constitutional weight. Oral arguments would focus heavily on the original meaning of the Second Amendment, historical traditions, and the limits of government authority over self-defense. When the ruling finally drops, it would declare that the right to carry for self-defense extends beyond the home and cannot be dependent on government permission structures that act as barriers to exercising a constitutional right. This becomes the core of the hypothetical ruling, that the Second Amendment protects not just the right to own a firearm, but the right to carry it in public for lawful purposes, and that requiring permits, or imposing discretionary approval violates this fundamental protection. Courts would apply a strict historical test, matching modern restrictions to historical analogs from the founding era. If states attempted to justify strict carry bans or extreme permit conditions using public safety arguments, the court would reject them as insufficient because constitutional rights cannot be canceled by broad government claims of safety without historical precedents. This alone would shift the legal landscape overnight. States with restrictive permit structures would immediately fall out of compliance. Laws requiring government permission, subjective qualification standards, or special justifications for carrying would no longer hold legal ground. Instead, the ruling would force states into shall-issue or permitless carry frameworks, depending on the exact language used. But it doesn't stop with public carry. A ruling powerful enough to eliminate a carry ban nationwide would also influence how future cases interpret magazine restrictions, transportation laws, storage mandates, age limits, background check frameworks, and any other area where states attempt to regulate firearms. Whenever you hear legal experts say a ruling sets precedent, this is what they mean. The decision becomes the lens through which lower courts must evaluate all related laws. This would open the door for challenges to many existing restrictions already under scrutiny in different states. And while some policies might remain, others would crumble because they lack historical roots. The biggest change would be that the burden of proof shifts entirely onto the government. No longer would courts simply accept states' claims that a law promotes safety. Instead, the government must prove that the restriction is consistent with the text and history of the Second Amendment. That's a massive change. And here's where gun owners must pay attention. A ruling like this might feel like absolute victory, but it also creates potential pitfalls. For example, enforcement agencies may need time to adapt their policies, leaving confusion about what is legal during the transition period. Officers might not yet be trained on new standards. State databases, permitting offices, and regulatory agencies may still be operating under old frameworks, causing uncertainty about who is considered legally allowed to carry. In some states, legislatures will move quickly to pass new laws attempting to work around the ruling, tightening sensitive location definitions or increasing restrictions on where firearms can be carried. This means gun owners must stay alert, because while permits may be eliminated, other forms of regulation may spike in response. This is why information matters. Every gun owner must stay ahead of state-level changes, court updates, new interpretations, and enforcement guidelines. One misunderstanding: carrying somewhere newly classified as a restricted area, assuming a rule has changed when it hasn't, or missing a legal update, can lead to serious legal consequences. And that's not because the ruling is unclear, but because rapid change always creates uncertainty. Now let's talk about how this could reshape the political landscape. A ruling of this size would ignite national debate. Some lawmakers would celebrate it as a restoration of constitutional rights. Others would condemn it as a public safety threat. Bills would be introduced in Congress attempting to either reinforce the ruling through national carry protections or challenge it indirectly through regulatory frameworks. Advocacy groups on both sides would mobilize. Lawsuits would erupt instantly as states test the boundaries of what they can still regulate. And the Supreme Court's ruling would remain the central reference point for every legal challenge to come. Culturally, millions of Americans would feel empowered knowing that their right to self-defense has been reaffirmed at the highest constitutional level. Many would begin carrying legally for the first time. Others who avoided the process due to permit delays or subjective approvals would now have access to exercising their rights. But this also means responsible carry education becomes more important than ever. More people carrying means more responsibility, more need for proper training, and more emphasis on safe, lawful decision-making. And this is something gun owners themselves continuously advocate for, rights paired with responsibility. At the same time, opponents of the ruling would likely focus on creating new safety programs, pushing local regulations, and attempting to influence future court cases. The environment would be one of intense legal and political activity on all sides, making it crucial for gun owners to stay informed and updated. This scenario also impacts commerce. Firearm retailers, instructors, holster makers, accessory manufacturers, and training facilities would all experience shifts in demand. Insurance companies offering legal protection plans would adjust their policies as the legal landscape changes. Even travel rules would be affected. Transporting firearms across state lines becomes significantly simpler when states can no longer enforce conflicting permit systems. But the biggest shift is psychological. For decades, gun owners in certain parts of the country have lived under restrictive frameworks, while others enjoyed broad freedoms. A ruling like this erases that divide, creating one unified national standard grounded in constitutional interpretation rather than political preference. Millions who once felt second-class compared to gun owners in freer states would now stand on equal legal footing. As we wrap this deep dive, the message becomes clear: whether someone supports or opposes a ruling like this, its impact would be historic and far-reaching. It would redefine the modern understanding of the Second Amendment, reshape states' ability to regulate carry, shift the national debate on self-defense, and set the stage for future court battles that will influence generations to come. And that's why this breakdown matters, because understanding the constitutional, legal, cultural, and practical implications of such a ruling is essential in a divided world where rights and responsibilities constantly collide. Knowledge is power, awareness is protection, and staying informed is the key to exercising your rights safely and confidently.